It happened in an instant. Penélope Cruz turned and froze. The man standing in front of her wasn't the Johnny Depp she remembered. Not the one she'd spent years working alongside. Not the one she'd quietly mourned from afar during the chaos of his very public fall. This Johnny was different. Not because of how he looked, though that alone was enough to take your breath away, but because of what he carried in his eyes. In that one moment, she broke, and what she said, barely a whisper, left the entire room shaken. He made me feel everything. What happened between them? What did she see that shattered her so completely? That moment wasn't scripted, and the truth behind it is even more powerful than anyone expected. For months, the industry whispered. Johnny Depp had vanished into quiet corners of Europe, staying off red carpets, avoiding cameras, speaking only through his work, and sometimes not even then. Some said he was rebuilding. Others thought he was retreating for good. But then, without warning, he resurfaced. And not in a headline, not in a courtroom. He returned to the one place where he never had to explain himself. A film set. It was a small project. Intimate. Filming in Spain. But what made it special wasn't the script. It was the casting. Penélope Cruz, Johnny Depp, together again, after years of silence. No press releases. No interviews. Just one day, they were both on set. And the moment Penelope saw him for the first time, she didn't smile. She didn't speak. She didn't even blink. She cried. And suddenly, every crew member on that set knew they weren't just witnessing a reunion. They were witnessing a resurrection. To understand why this moment hit her so hard, you have to go back. Back to 2001. Blow was gritty, raw, and unforgettable. Not just because of the story, but because of the chemistry between its stars. Back then, Johnny was the golden rebel. Penelope was the rising Spanish star. Together, they lit up the screen. But off camera, there was a quiet respect, a bond neither of them ever tried to explain. They reunited a decade later in Pirates of the Caribbean, on Stranger Tides. By that point, the world knew who they were. But behind the scenes, Penelope always described Johnny the same way. He's a soul I've known before, like we've met in another life. But then, the silence. As Depp's legal battles with Amber Heard consumed headlines, most of Hollywood distanced itself. Even those who loved him said nothing, including Penelope. Some said she was protecting her image. Others believed it was something else, something more personal. Painful even, because when someone you admire is dragged through the mud, it doesn't just affect their reputation. It affects your memory of them. And for Penelope Cruz, Johnny Depp wasn't just a co-star. He was someone who had shaped entire chapters of her creative life. So when she agreed to this new role, she knew it would mean facing him again. But what she didn't expect was how it would feel to see him again. She'd prepared herself for the moment. She thought she could handle it. What she wasn't ready for was the man who walked in that day. No dialogue, no fanfare, not even an introduction. The air shifted the moment he stepped on set. Johnny Depp didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His presence said everything. Hair slicked back with streaks of silver. A tailored black coat draped effortlessly over his frame. There was a quiet elegance to him, a kind of earned stillness that didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. Penelope Cruz turned toward the sound of his footsteps. And in that one instant, her entire body language changed. Her hand reached up instinctively, first to her lips, then over her heart. Her mouth parted, but no words came out. Her breath hitched, and then tears. Not dramatic, not performative, just real. She stood there, frozen, unraveling, caught in a moment that no one could script. And that's when she whispered it. 6 words, barely audible, but undeniable. He made me feel everything. A line so simple, and yet it held the weight of everything they'd shared, everything they'd lost, and everything she never said back then. This wasn't nostalgia. This wasn't romance. This was recognition. Recognition of a man changed by pain, and still somehow intact. But what exactly did she feel? Why did those 6 words break her and move everyone else? There's a reason this moment wasn't in the official footage. It wasn't meant to be. According to a lighting assistant, the whole set just stopped breathing. Even the boom operator lowered his arms, unsure whether to continue. One crew member, who's worked on more than 40 productions, later said, "It wasn't acting. It felt like 2 people crashing into a truth they'd avoided for years." And what truth was that? Maybe it wasn't about what was said, but what had never been said. In interviews over the years, Penelope often praised Johnny's artistry, his unpredictability, his vulnerability. But after the trial, she went silent. Some thought she was protecting herself. Others believed she was grieving, not for his career, but for the man she once knew, the man the world no longer recognized. And yet, there he stood, not begging for forgiveness, not playing a role, just present. There were no cameras rolling when Penelope turned away to collect herself, but eyewitnesses say she was trembling. One crew member caught her saying under her breath, "I thought I lost him." That line was never confirmed, but the people who heard it say they'll never forget it. Still, the most powerful part wasn't what happened in public. It was what they shared in private, just minutes later. After the emotional shock faded and the scene was reset, Penelope found a quiet corner behind the monitor station. She wasn't hiding. She was processing. A few minutes later, Depp walked over. No one followed. No one dared interrupt. He sat beside her, quiet, calm. There were no scripts in hand, no lines to rehearse. Just 2 people, old friends, maybe something more, grappling with the weight of time. According to one witness just a few feet away, the silence between them was heavier than any conversation. Until she spoke, softly, slowly, like she was exhaling something she'd held in for years. Penelope said, "You don't even know what you've survived." It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper, something honest. Johnny didn't speak. He just nodded, once, and pressed his hand against his chest. Another crew member claims he smiled at her. Not a happy smile, a knowing one. The kind that says, "I'm still here." And that was when she said the words, clearer this time. "He made me feel everything I didn't let myself feel for years. Pain, relief, love, regret, all of it. But why now? Why this moment?" Let's break those 6 words apart. Because they weren't just an emotional reaction. They were a confession. For years, Penelope Cruz had maintained a graceful silence. She never gave interviews about Depp during the height of his legal battles. She never joined the wave of supporters or critics. Instead, she disappeared from the conversation. And in doing so, many assumed she didn't care. But that assumption shattered the moment she saw him again. Because her reaction wasn't one of politeness. It wasn't professional courtesy. It was raw. She cried not just because he looked different, but because something in him survived. In that single glance, she saw every version of him. The man from Blow, the pirate, the friend, the wounded figure behind headlines. And somewhere in all of that, she saw something she hadn't seen in years. The artist, the soul, the man who never stopped feeling. It broke her, and it also healed something. Later that day, another crew member overheard her speaking to the director. "I didn't know how much I needed that moment, until it happened." No press release, no Instagram post, just one broken down reaction to a man who had already been broken, and was now quietly rebuilding. But it wasn't just Penelope who felt the weight of that moment. The ripple effect hit everyone watching, including fans across the world. They were just 6 words. But those 6 words, "He made me feel everything," echoed far beyond the film set. The moment the story leaked, it caught fire. Without any official photos, without any video, just whispered accounts from behind the scenes, and Penelope's words, reportedly spoken with her hand over her mouth and tears still in her eyes. Social media lit up. One fan posted, "If she broke down seeing him, what chance do the rest of us have?" Another wrote, "They've always shared something real. You can't fake that kind of reaction." But what made this moment so viral wasn't just the emotional weight. It was the silence leading up to it. Depp had stayed largely quiet since his courtroom victory. No interviews, no press tours. Even his most dedicated fans began to wonder, will we ever truly get him back? And then this, not a performance, not a speech, just a single moment, raw, unfiltered, and devastatingly real. Even people who hadn't followed his journey closely were moved, because it wasn't about Hollywood. It was about connection. Two people, one glance, and a history too powerful to ignore. But while fans online were swept into emotion, something else was happening behind the scenes. Something that could change Johnny's entire future. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a statement. Without saying a word, Johnny Depp told the industry everything it needed to know. He's back. He's ready. And he doesn't need headlines to prove it. Following that set visit, industry whispers began to shift again. One high-level agent anonymously told a trade reporter, "Everyone wants to know what project he's doing next. Now they want to work with him, not just talk about him." And Penelope? Insiders say she was the driving force behind this particular project. That she insisted on working with Johnny again. Privately, quietly, without fanfare. According to one source close to the production, she didn't want publicity. She wanted closure. But she may have gotten more than that. Executives who had once pulled away from Depp began reaching out again. Not because of a PR campaign, but because of a reaction they couldn't fake. The image of a respected actress, visibly overwhelmed by his presence, spoke louder than any damage control ever could. And more than that, it reminded people why they loved Johnny in the first place. He's unpredictable. He's complicated. But when he's fully present, he's unforgettable. And for Penelope, that presence was something she hadn't seen in years. But it wasn't just about him. It was also about her. It happened after filming wrapped for the day. The sun was setting. Most of the crew had packed up. Johnny sat on the edge of the trailer steps, sipping tea and looking out across the lot. Penelope approached. Slowly, quietly, she sat next to him. Neither of them said a word for almost a minute. Then, just above a whisper, she said, "Promise me, you won't disappear again." There was no tension, no drama, just a quiet plea from someone who had once lost something and didn't want to lose it again. Johnny turned to her, and he didn't make a grand speech. He didn't even smile. He simply placed his hand over hers, looked her in the eye and said, "Only if you don't forget me." Those were the last words exchanged that day. No one captured them on camera. No one had to. The emotion in Penelope's face as she walked away was enough to say it all. Later that week, in a closed interview with a Spanish publication, she was asked about the moment. She didn't confirm anything, but she did say this: "Some people stay in your heart long after they leave your life. When they come back, your heart remembers them instantly." And that's what happened. Her heart remembered. And for Johnny, whose reputation, career, and very identity had been pulled apart in front of the world, being remembered like that may have meant more than anything else. But maybe the real story here isn't about Johnny or Penelope. Maybe it's about something far simpler, something everyone watching could feel but couldn't quite explain. Sometimes moments happen in silence, without a script, without a spotlight, and they hit harder than any headline ever could. What Penelope Cruz said wasn't meant for the world. It wasn't a quote prepared for PR. It was an involuntary reaction, an emotional slip that said more than any speech ever could. "He made me feel everything." And in a world of cold statements and rehearsed reunions, that one line pierced through everything, because it reminded fans of something we tend to forget. That beneath the headlines, beneath the scandals, beneath the makeup and the roles, there are people, real people, with real history, and sometimes that history resurfaces in ways that feel bigger than life. Johnny didn't beg for attention. He didn't seek forgiveness. He simply showed up. And in doing so, he reminded one of his oldest collaborators of something she'd buried deep inside. Not just who he was, but who she was when she believed in him. Penelope's tears weren't weakness. They were recognition. And maybe they were healing. So what does this moment mean for Johnny Depp? Time will tell. But one thing is certain. If Penélope Cruz, who's seen his rise, his fall, and now his quiet return, can be moved to tears just by seeing him again, then maybe Johnny Depp hasn't lost anything at all. Maybe he's just begun a new chapter. One more honest, more grounded, and more powerful than ever. For more of the latest news, check out this video.